Whispers in the nave. Stone, silence, shadows. Deserted monasteries, repositories of forgotten faith, echo with a stillness more profound than any forest or tomb. These ancient structures, once vibrant with the chants of monks and the prayers of the devout, now stand as silent sentinels of a bygone era. This is where I found myself, drawn to the chilling tales whispered in hushed tones by locals who wouldn't dare approach after sunset. Their eyes would widen with fear as they recounted stories of the supernatural, of spirits that roamed the halls and voices that echoed in the dead of night. They spoke of eerie murmurs, spectral figures, and a bone-chilling presence that lingered within the crumbling walls. The very air seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that set my nerves on edge. I, however, am not so easily deterred. My curiosity, my need to uncover the truth, drove me forward. My fascination, you see, outweighs my fear. The allure of the unknown, the promise of uncovering secrets long buried, was too strong to resist. My footsteps echoed through the cavernous nave of the first monastery, nestled high in the Italian Alps. Each step seemed to reverberate through the empty space, a stark reminder of the solitude that enveloped me. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the gloom. The interplay of light and shadow created an almost ethereal atmosphere, as if the very air was alive with whispers of the past. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of decay and the weight of centuries. It was as if time itself had slowed within these walls, each moment stretching into an eternity. It was a place where prayers once ascended, now replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to hum in my ears. The echoes of devotion had long since faded, leaving behind a void that was almost tangible. As twilight deepened, the shadows stretched, twisting familiar shapes into grotesque phantoms. The play of light and dark seemed to bring the very walls to life, each shadow a potential harbinger of the unknown. I paused, breath catching in my throat. The silence was oppressive, pressing in on me from all sides. Was that a whisper, a sigh, carried on the breeze? The faintest of sounds seemed to echo through the nave, a ghostly murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. It seemed to emanate from the altar, a hulking mass of stone shrouded in darkness. The altar, once a focal point of worship, now stood as a silent witness to the passage of time. Drawing closer, I felt a prickle of unease crawl across my skin. The air seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. The silence was broken now by the faintest of sounds, like parchment rustling or breath rasping against stone. It was as if the very walls were trying to communicate, to share their secrets with me. Then, clear as a bell, a voice. It cut through the silence, resonant and commanding, deep, resonant, echoing through the emptiness. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling the vast space with its presence. "Go back," it intoned, the Latin syllables heavy with warning. The words were ancient, filled with a power that transcended time. "This place is not for the living." The message was clear, a stark warning that sent a chill through my very soul. I stood frozen, heart pounding as the voice faded into the oppressive silence. The weight of the warning hung heavy in the air. Fear, sharp and cold, gripped me. It was a primal fear, one that spoke to the deepest parts of my being, but there was something else too. A sense of connection, of understanding, that seemed to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. A profound sense of sorrow, of longing that seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves. It was as if the monastery itself was mourning, a silent lament for all that had been lost. Turning to leave, I saw it, a movement, a shadow that seemed to coalesce into a form, a figure, shrouded in shadow, standing at the far end of the nave. It was almost as if it had been waiting for me, a guardian of the past, tall, gaunt, with eyes that gleamed with an unnatural light. The eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness, locking onto mine with an intensity that was almost unbearable. For a moment our gazes met, and a chill deeper than any I had ever known cut through me. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated terror. Then, with a swiftness that defied its spectral appearance, it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. The sudden absence was almost as jarring as its presence had been. I fled, scrambling out of the monastery and into the night, the spectral voice and the image of those glowing eyes seared into my memory. The experience had left an indelible mark on my soul, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. The second monastery lay nestled in the heart of rural Ireland, its crumbling walls embraced by a cloak of ivy. Locals spoke of a weeping statue, its stone tears a harbinger of misfortune. They whispered of a heartbroken monk, his anguished sobs echoing through the halls, a lament for a love forbidden by his vows. It was a tale of despair, of transgression, of a sorrow that lingered beyond the veil of death. The story had been passed down through generations, each retelling adding a layer of mystique and dread. A blanket of fog clung to the ruins, obscuring the world beyond in a spectral shroud. The air, heavy with moisture, carried the tang of salt and the cloying sweetness of decay. The silence here was different, not the oppressive stillness of the Italian monastery, but a hushed expectancy, as if the very air were holding its breath. My footsteps seemed to fall without sound on the moss-covered flagstones as I made my way deeper into the heart of the ruin. The chapel, when I found it, was a testament to time's relentless march. Stained glass windows, once vibrant with color, were now dull and lifeless, their intricate designs lost to the ravages of the elements. The once sacred space now felt like a mausoleum, a resting place for forgotten memories. And there, in the apse, stood the statue. Carved from pale marble, it depicted a woman, her head bowed in grief, her face obscured by her hands. As I drew closer, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. The air grew noticeably colder, and a faint mist, like the exhalation of a mournful sigh, seemed to emanate from the statue itself. Then I heard it, a soft keening sound like the whisper of a sob coming from the direction of the statue. It was as if the very stone was weeping for the lost souls who had once found solace within these walls. The stone beneath the statue's hands was stained a dark, rusty brown. Tears of blood, they called it. As I watched, mesmerized by a morbid fascination, another drop welled up, clinging to the marble for a heartbeat before falling with a soft plop onto the stone below. Suddenly a gust of wind slammed through the chapel, extinguishing my lantern and plunging me into darkness. I stumbled back, fear lending wings to my feet, as a new wave of sound washed over me. Not sobs this time, but laughter, cold, mocking, echoing through the darkness. It was as if the spirits of the past were mocking my intrusion, reminding me that some secrets are best left undisturbed. The final monastery lay on a windswept island off the coast of Scotland, a place where the relentless waves crashed against jagged rocks, and the howling winds carried tales of sorrow and despair. Battered by storms and shrouded in legend, it was said to be haunted by the ghost of the former abbot, a man consumed by guilt and driven to madness by a dark secret. The islanders spoke of his restless spirit, forever wandering the desolate halls, seeking redemption that would never come. The islanders spoke of chilling confessions whispered in the dead of night, of pleas for forgiveness that went unanswered, and of a presence that clung to the ruins, unable to find peace. They claimed to hear the abbot's voice carried on the wind, a mournful lament that sent shivers down their spines. This, I knew, was where my journey would end. The ferryman who took me to the island refused to set foot on its shores, his eyes wide with a fear that mirrored the stories I had heard. He spoke of the island's curse, of those who ventured there never returning the same. The monastery loomed above, a brooding silhouette against the storm-tossed sky. Its ancient stones seemed to absorb the darkness, exuding an aura of foreboding that made my heart race. The wind howled like a banshee, whipping my coat around my legs and carrying with it the tang of salt and the faint, unsettling scent of decay. The air was thick with moisture, and every breath felt heavy, laden with the weight of centuries of sorrow. As I stepped through the ruined archway that served as the entrance, I was greeted by a silence so profound it seemed to press down on me, suffocating me. The stillness was almost tangible, as if the very air had been stilled by the weight of the past. The monastery was a labyrinth of crumbling corridors and collapsed chambers, each one whispering tales of forgotten lives and lingering sorrow. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the shadows danced with a life of their own. I wandered through the ruins, guided by intuition and a growing sense of unease. The air grew colder, damper, and the silence was broken only by the scuttling of unseen creatures and the mournful cry of gulls overhead. Every step echoed with the ghosts of the past, and I felt their eyes upon me. Finally, I found it. The abbot's chamber. A place where time seemed to stand still and the weight of his sins hung heavy in the air. A single window, its glass long gone, offered a view of the raging sea beyond. The waves crashed against the rocks with a fury that mirrored the turmoil within the abbot's soul. Dust lay thick on the floor, undisturbed for centuries. It was as if the room had been frozen in time, a silent witness to the abbot's torment. And in the center of the room, facing the wall, was a wooden prie-dieu, worn smooth by countless hours of prayer and penance. The wood was darkened by the touch of his hands, a testament to his desperate search for absolution. As I approached, I felt a chill, a sudden drop in temperature that seemed to suck the air from my lungs. It was as if the very essence of the abbot's despair had seeped into the walls, chilling the room to its core. And then I heard it. A voice, low and guttural, rasping like dry leaves. "Forgive me," it whispered, the words thick with despair. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the walls and filling the room with its sorrow. "Forgive me, for I have sinned." The voice was filled with a desperation that tugged at my heart, a plea for mercy that had gone unanswered for centuries. I stood there, frozen in place, as the voice continued, pouring out a litany of transgressions, of betrayals, of acts so dark they chilled me to the bone. Each confession was a dagger to the heart, a glimpse into the abbot's tortured soul. The voice rose in pitch and intensity, becoming a tortured wail that seemed to shake the very foundations of the monastery. The walls trembled with the force of his anguish, and I felt the ground beneath me shudder. Then, as abruptly as it began, it stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was as if the very air had been sucked from the room, leaving me gasping for breath. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It pressed down on me, wrapping around me like a shroud. I could feel the weight of the abbot's sorrow, a palpable presence that filled the room. I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest, and that's when I saw it. Scratched into the dusty floor, the words, "Their whispers follow, their sorrow lingers. Their secrets are mine now." Scratched into the dusty floor, the words, "Their whispers follow, their sorrow lingers, their secrets are mine now." The message was a chilling reminder of the abbot's eternal torment, a testament to the darkness that had consumed him, and below a single name etched deep into the wood, Benedict. The name seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a final haunting reminder of the man who had once sought solace within these walls.